back, listeners, to the Mindful Living podcast, where we explore the art of living with intention, balance, and presence. I'm your host, Sana, and listeners, today we are diving into a topic that touches every single one of us at some point in life: grief. But not just grief as a concept. We are exploring how to honor loss without losing ourselves in it. And listeners, my guest today has walked through a nearly unimaginable season of loss, losing more than 15 loved ones over the span of 3 years. And what makes her story even more unique is how she often received prophetic messages of intuitive downloads before many of these losses occurred, something that left her nervous system completely overwhelmed and led to deep social anxiety. But what's so powerful about her journey is how she found her way back, listeners. Through therapy, spiritual coaching, and personal practices, she learned how to navigate the ebbs and flows of grief without guilt. And eventually, she felt called to write a book, New Leaf, to help others through their own transitions. And today on The Mindful Living, we are going to unpack what mindful grieving really looks like. Is it even possible? How do we honor our pain without letting it define us? How can there be beauty in transitions we never asked for? So stay tuned because this conversation is going to be both grounding and eye opening. And listeners, meet my lovely guest, Tasha Martin. Tasha, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Sanai. Thank you. How's everything?
It's really great, and I'm really thankful that we are touching this topic. We are having conversation on this because grief is such a powerful emotion. It can really make us or break us, and of course, Tasha, it's unimaginable loss, and I'm really I really appreciate your courage that you are here to share your thoughts, your feelings, your journey with all of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. Um, so
Yeah.
my story goes back to about 2022 after the COVID pandemic, where, folks were used to becoming used to people dying around them due to the virus. And so I didn't lose a lot of people during COVID. The deaths around me started in 2022, a year after. And like you were saying, I was receiving prophetic messages a week or two prior to their passing. And that became very spiritually traumatizing for me. As someone who's always had a relationship with God, someone who's never hesitated to sit and try to be still. Being still became scary because I didn't know what downloads I would receive. And so it shook my relationship with God. It shook my relationship with people because I just did not know what I would find out when I would go into a public space with those that I loved, and even strangers.
Wow. And Tasha, were these prophetic messages like visions or like signs or premonitions that the it's going to affect your certain loved one, or were they like subtle signs for you?
It was like a gut punch, or I would feel a very hollow space in my stomach or even in my heart area, and I just knew something was wrong, or I would get a feeling that I needed to reach out to the person because something was going wrong, something was not normal, and so that's how the feelings would overcome me. And sometimes I would even get like a dark cloud that would cover my eyes. You know, when you close your eyes and it goes dark, I would see a cloud when speaking to a person. And it was unexpected. I did not know until it would happen, until the feeling would overcome me.
Hmm. And were these uh, feelings and messages Were they with them since childhood, or you kind of had these more around, particularly during COVID, because that particular time period was really, really, irrespective of whether it affected our loved ones or not, but what we were seeing, what we were experiencing for every one of us, it was, horrible. I mean, it was really, really bad. So I'm just curious to ask Tasha if it's okay if you can let us know.
Yeah, so beginning when I was younger, I would have, some folks call them vibes. You can feel a vibe. I would be sensitive to different presence and energies. But it wasn't something that was talked about in our family. And so it wasn't something that I explored until about my 20s when I had a strong message to give to one of my cousins to say, be careful. Whatever is going on, whatever you are choosing to do, just be careful. And so I would get these very strong warnings and I would give them to my family members, not knowing what the warning was for or what the circumstances would be. I just knew I had to tell the person, be careful. So that started in my 20s. And I remember being very young and not understanding this gift, and
Mm.
I got a message that there was a man in my family who was terminally ill. And I remember reaching out to all of my uncles and just blatantly asking them, "Are you okay?" And it scared them. And so I ended up suppressing the messages that I would receive because what I was learning is that it's scary for people to hear information. And so I had to learn a little bit later in life that when I get messages, I have to ask permission. What is it that I'm supposed to do with this information? Because just because I have the information does not mean that I have permission to tell the person or to take action on it. Sometimes it's just for me to know.
I think that's a very important aspect of this. Because some might argue here that this kind of sensitivity could be self-fulfilling, that maybe you were expecting loss and it shaped your experience. And Tasha, you mentioned that grief isn't linear, yet it's kind of natural, or maybe it's expected of us that grief has to follow some kind of timeline. So was there ever a point where you felt pressure from yourself or others to just be okay again?
Absolutely, especially this time around because I sit at the executive leadership table in my organization. And so there's a lot of responsibility that falls on me to make sure that my team and department are meeting certain metrics and that we are hitting our goals for the company. So when you are managing a team of individuals, when you're responsible for developing professionally a group of folks and ensuring that the company maintains, its responsibility to the public, there's so much pressure, and as a leader, oftentimes, the pressure is not understood, from others, whether it's, your manager, your colleagues, or the folks who report to you, and so in this season, there was a lot of pressure to be okay because we had goals to meet, and I remember, what happened is that it was very difficult for me to get out of bed. I could wake up at 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I would literally lay in bed until 8:30, 9 o'clock because I was almost paralyzed. And so immediately I did not recognize that I was depressed. And I'm a licensed social worker. So I've provided therapy to children and families. I've coached and mentored others. But at the time, I thought that because there were days when I felt great and I could interact and I felt calm, that I was okay. But like you said, grief is not linear. And so there were days when I felt amazing, and there were days when I felt very low and could not get out of bed. And it took me having a panic attack at one of my friend's birthday parties to realize that I needed to go into therapy myself.
That must have been a kind of um, such a difficult realization, Tasha, because until this point you were assisting, helping others in therapy. But did you feel weak or surprised that you needed therapy, or you just embraced it and thought, okay, let's just go with this and let's um, uh, let's somehow get past of it. What were you thinking when you realized that?
I think it was a mix. There was, I wouldn't say shame. I think because I'm a clinician and because I know what to do, like if I was talking to a client, I can tell them easily, like, try these 5 things, right?
Mm, mhm,
And so I would try the things that I would typically tell one of my clients to do. And so for the things that I was trying to not work, that was difficult. And I just said, I'm going to continue to try the different strategies, whether it is a breathing technique, whether it is a technique to bring me back to presence. So, different grounding techniques. Let me try to do these things to support. And sometimes they supported, and then other times they didn't. And so, it wasn't until I had this event and one of my friends witnessed it, and she had to encourage me. She said to she, I think it might be time for you to get therapy. And at that point, this is a trusted friend who I've known for over 20 years. I just agreed. I said, you know what, you're right. And when I found my therapist, it was very important to me for me to talk to her about the spiritual components of what I was experiencing because not all therapists are comfortable speaking about spirituality. And I needed someone who could walk with me through my journey, not just from a cognitive level, but also from a spiritual level and an emotional level too.
mm. And this the therapy versus spiritual practices. Uh, I would like to you know uh, explore more about it. So this is a very unique combination, Tasha. And um, did you find one approach to be more grounding than the other, or is it like both of the approaches are complementing each other?
Mhm. That's a really interesting question. I would say that it complemented each other, but I did have to first start with the cognitive aspects. And my therapist telling me that it's a safe space for me to be very vulnerable and talk about my experience in that space. Because my traumatic experience was related to my spiritual downloads, I was afraid to even sit and engage with God in my spirituality. So it wasn't until I knew that I had a safe outlet that I felt comfortable enough to resume my spiritual practice. So I had my therapist, and then maybe a few months later, I went and found a spiritual coach who really worked with me on creating a protection around myself and giving pretty much taking ownership over the messages I would receive and saying no. I do not want to receive messages right now or saying, yes, I am open to messages. So being able to open and close off those aspects of yourself, in the same way that we prepare ourselves for bed, we know it's time for me to shut down. I had to know how to shut down and quiet the voice of my spiritual relationship and say, this is not a good time. So once I was able to bring the awareness with my therapist and support with my spiritual coach, I was able to bring those 2 together again to do the work of my healing and to start developing practices that were more supportive.
Wow. I think that's a really empowering way to look at it. You are not basically kind of I shouldn't use the word control, but you are mindful in when you would like to receive the messages and when you wouldn't like to receive, because sometimes it can feel like gift, then sometimes it can really feel like a burden. So that's very interesting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Mm,
so what I started to really tap into were the 5 elements, of earth, water, air, fire, and ether. And
mhm,
that really helped me to reconnect with what nature already brings to us.
mhm.
There's so many healing aspects in nature that we forget about. And so there was a nature component too that I was able to combine with the cognitive and with the spiritual to help me heal. And so some of the strategies that I would use were about, consisted of going outside, consisted of putting my feet in the dirt and reconnecting with earth and expressing a level of gratitude that the earth is here to hold me up and to support me. And so that also started to nurture my reconnection with my spiritual mind.
That's lovely. That's kind of, I think it's grounding. You are connecting with or reconnecting with earth, and you are expressing your gratitude towards earth, towards nature, towards the elements, the basic elements that create us. And
Mhm.
since at some point of the time, you were like having a tumultuous relation with God, and now we know for the fact that praying is a very beautiful way of centering, kind of surrendering. So now, do you ever feel like that kind of animosity or that uh, that discomfort, when you pray or you try to embrace those spiritual messages?
Not anymore. And I think that it became easier for me to experience the loss of those around me because one thing
Mm,
I do believe is that the body may die, but the spirit lives on. And so how do I honor my loved ones in that time? That is something I had to begin practicing more intentionally through my grief journey, in order to preserve myself, in order to remain intact. There were times when I was dissociated from who I was, and I could not figure out where was the amazing person that I loved in myself. And so I had to look in the mirror and look in my eyes and state affirmations that I was still connected to my loved ones who are now deceased, that I was still whole and loved and cared for, um by, I call them the angels in human form. So I like to say that, I always ask, send me angels in human form. So those are the people who have what I need, the guidance, the protection, whatever it is that I'm lacking in this moment that I can't seem to find for myself, please send a messenger, or someone to support and guide me in this time. And so spiritually, I would just ask for help, like, and surrender and say, I don't know. I do not have the answer here. What do you want me to do? And that's actually, how I started to compile all of the practices that I had been working on in my journey, to pull together my book because I was just like, "What do you want me to do? I don't know." And I just started being obedient instead of trying to control, and I found that to be the most helpful and supportive thing on my healing journey.
that's really beautiful, Tasha. Really beautiful. We'll definitely come to your book, but also, let's explore. Let's define mindful grieving. So
Yes,
you talk about grieving with grace and without guilt, but what does
absolutely.
it look like in practice?
Yes. So, one of the things, remember, because I was able to sense some of the losses before people died, I felt the level of responsibility of, well, what could I have done to stop this? Was I supposed to tell this person? What should I have done differently? And that really hurt my heart.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to let that go, something that I had to do, I would really engage with with water. And so I would give myself baths. This is the practice that I would engage in. I would give myself a bath or a shower, and I would use various oils such as rose oil to bring love, or I would add honey to bring sweetness into my life. And I would also use lavender or eucalyptus to inhale and just shift how my mind and body were operating in the moment. I would also wash my hands and pretty much symbolically wash away the guilt and say, I don't need to do anything. I do not need to feel guilty about my grief journey, or I don't need to feel guilty that my grief journey does not look the way other people want it to look. And so when I talk about going and sitting in the dirt and reconnecting with earth, I also connect it with water as a way of flushing away any guilt, flushing away any feelings that of were uneasy for me, and also reaching out my hands literally to the above my head, to the sides of me, and bringing those hands into my heart to say, I am receiving all of the love that is around me because the love is endless. And
Mhm.
so a lot of it was very much seeing the beauty of what's around me and reaching out to receive it, recognizing that the water can flush the emotions of what that are in that's in us, that we're feeling, and even speaking positive words into my water, into my drinking water before taking a sip. And some of those might be, I'm drinking this water. I would speak directly into the water and say, I am drinking this water and I am asking it to help flush the anxiety that is in me. Help me to feel relieved and revived back to who I know that I am. So those were some of the other practical techniques, in addition to some evidence that based techniques that have been studied, tried and true through in the scientific world as well.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. That's really really grounding, and I love that because you are not forcing yourself to be calm, but it's more about creating space for whatever is actually there or real in that moment. So yeah.
Absolutely. And it's hard to be present when you feel like your world is crumbling because the people around you that you love are no longer here. It is very challenging to be present. And that's one of the hardest things to do. So as a clinician, one of the activities that I like to use, I still use it when I see like when I can sense my mind is wandering or becoming very worried, when I can sense my body is tensing, I'll use a technique called a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 countdown. And I also use this with children because by a certain age, children know their numbers and they know their colors. So I'll look around my environment and I'll say, let me find 5 things that are the color blue. And I will look for those 5 things very intentionally. I will go touch those 5 things, and then I'll count down to give me 4 things that are another color, let's say orange. And I will find every single color associated with that number until I sense my body to be calm again. And what that does to the mind is that it distracts you from whatever is has you worrying in that moment. And so that's been a very practical tool for me and a practical tool that I've used with 5 and 6 year olds.
Wow, that is really really creative, Tasha.
It's
Really creative.
it's so fun. And the kids love it because, you're saying to them, I need your help. And kids love to help. I need your help. Okay. And you have them run around the room and touch the different colors and come back to you. It's a game changer. It's a game changer. You don't have to go to school to get a degree or a license in this work to really start practicing some of these things.
That is true. That is true. It's like non-judgmental, no questions, just tell me the problem and I'll help you. And I think that
Right.
that's a very, very it's innocent, it's pure, it's from the heart. Yep.
It is.
And before we wrap up, Tasha, now talking about your new book, of course, you when you received the divine assignment to write your book, New Leaf, um, did you immediately accept it or you ignored it? I mean, did you try to ignore it?
So I've never sought out to be an author. So when I
Okay.
received the divine message to write a book, my face squinched up and I just looked and shrugged my shoulders and asked the question, write a book? What am I writing a book about? I'm not an author. That's not my calling, right? There are plenty of people who are wordsmiths and love to write and journalists. That's not what I set out to do. But something along my grief journey that I had to do was to surrender and be obedient. And so I just started asking the question, what am I writing this book about? And the message that I received was about grief, about loss, and about renewal. And so I started thinking, well, what are the things that I've been practicing to help me renew myself and to refine and reconnect with myself? And so I did a huge brain dump, and the five elements came to mind first. And then I started to break down, well, what else is associated with these five elements? What about the elements have been healing for me? And I thought about the various symbols. So the tree of life will be an earth symbol, the waterfall will be a water symbol. And so every single chapter connects an element with symbols. And there are also affirmations that are connected to each of these elements that I would speak to myself and that anyone who has this book should look in the mirror and engage in mirror talk to reconnect them with the elements. And then on top of that, there are over 50 evidence-based practices in the book, which is found in the glossary of techniques, so that folks can just jump into the physical components or the sensory components if they don't have time to journal and write their thoughts and process what's going on with them.
Wow. I think this book is part of your own healing, and of course, it's definitely a map for others, guidance for others, and I think it's very much needed, and it's a very I think it's like the personal lived experiences shared through this book. So Tasha, if our listeners they would like to connect with you and also get a hold of your book, what would be the best way?
So the best way to stay connected with me is through my link tree. My link tree is Restoring Legacy. Also, my email address is connect@restoringlegacy.org. And I can also be found on Instagram at restoring_legacy or on LinkedIn, Tashia Martin. And Tashia is spelled Tashia. So those are the places where I can be found. And my book is linked on each of those sites as well, but it can also be found directly on Amazon.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes. And Tasha, this is such a beautiful conversation because grief, as devastating as it is, it can also be a teacher. And definitely your journey, uh, your story, it shows us that we don't have to rush through loss or numb ourselves to survive it. Instead, we can honor it, we can allow it to flow, and slowly learn to carry it with more grace. So, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So, to all the beautiful mindful listeners out there, if you are walking through grief right now, know that you're not alone and that it doesn't make you weak to ask for help. And to connect with Tasha and learn more about her book, New Leaf, check out the links in the show notes. And if this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need it today. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in to the Mindful Living podcast. I am your host, Sana, and I'll see you in the next episode as we continue exploring the art of living with intention, one breath at a time. Thank you.